All right, let's dive into another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty wild. Predictions about the year 2025. We've got this massive stack of sources, YouTube profits, scientific forecasts, all that good stuff, and we're going to, go through all of it.
It's interesting though, right? Because predictions aren't just about seeing into the future. They often show like what people are worried about or what they're hoping for. It's a kind of window into like the anxieties and the dreams of, right now.
Yeah. So even if we're not like zipping around in flying cars by 2025, just looking at these predictions can tell us a lot about, ourselves, what we're thinking about. Okay, so where do we even start with all this? We've got like time travelers and, psychic dreamers. It's a lot.
Well, let's start with Ryu Kokawa. She's this Japanese manga artist, and
Right.
she claims to have these like super vivid dreams that predict the future. 10 out of 15 of her like documented dreams have actually come true, including one about the 2011 Choku earthquake and tsunami.
Wow. That's really accurate. What about this 2025 dream? What's that all about?
Okay, so she describes this massive, like, undersea explosion in the Pacific Ocean, specifically on July 5th, 2025. She sees these huge tsunamis, like over 100 meters high, hitting surrounding countries. And get this, she also sees, like, a new landmass emerging. It connects Taiwan, the Philippines, and Hong Kong.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot to process.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting that this, dramatic imagery is coming from someone in Japan, a country that's like experienced so many natural disasters.
Right. It makes you wonder if, like, even the more out there predictions maybe tap into, those very real cultural anxieties about nature.
Okay, so we've got this prediction about a like submerged Pacific and, a new continent, but she's not the only one talking about these kinds of things, right?
No, not at all. We also have sources like Al Bielek, who claims to be a time traveler, and then there's Gordon Michael Scallion. He's a futurist who's known for these like prophetic maps. Both of them describe visions that kind of line up with Okawa's, especially about America being, mostly submerged. Only the high altitude areas would remain.
A time traveler. Okay, we might have to say that for another deep dive because that sounds fascinating. But back to these submerged continents, are there any like real world events that might be connected to these predictions?
Well, there's this trend, it's been getting a lot of attention. Wealthy people are buying up all this remote, high altitude land. Like, think Bill Gates and his planned city in Arizona. And some people think they're, prepping for some huge disaster, but who knows?
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. So we have these kind of far-fetched predictions, but then we also have like things happening in the real world that seem to, connect with them. It's kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this whole other layer that brings in some science. The NOAA, they're predicting a period of like crazy solar activity. Also in July 2025, they call it a solar maximum, which basically means we're going to see a lot more solar flares.
Okay, but how does like the sun fit into all of this? What do solar flares even do?
Well, they're not just pretty lights, Intense solar flares, they can mess with communication systems, navigation, even damage satellites, like worst case scenario. They could cause widespread power outages.
Now that you mention it, yeah, I have heard of solar storms causing like problems before, but never anything big enough to like knock out power.
Mm-hmm.
So are you thinking that these like solar events with all the chaos they could cause might actually be a part of the disasters that, Okawa, Bielik, and Scallion are predicting? It's like we're putting together a puzzle here.
It's definitely a possibility worth considering, and these predictions go beyond just, geographical stuff. There are also a lot of prophecies about like social and political unrest in 2025.
You're talking about Hamish Parker, right?
Right.
The British psychic who like nailed those 2024 predictions.
That's the one. He predicted that Biden would drop out of the 2024 race and that Trump would be reelected. And, well, both of those happened.
Okay, now that gets my attention. So what's he seeing for 2025?
Uh-huh.
Is it all like doom and gloom like we've been
Whoa.
talking about?
It's a little bit of both, actually. He predicts these cyber attacks on China's payment systems, which, could really mess with the global economy. He also sees political tensions in Asia getting, like, really bad, maybe even turning into conflict. Oh, and he even predicts potential health problems for the North Korean leader.
So not exactly sunshine and rainbows then. But is there like any good news in his predictions?
There is. He describes a vision of a phoenix in the fire. It suggests that even after like all these challenges and setbacks, there's a chance for, renewal and positive change. It's not all bad.
Okay, so maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, at least according to Parker.
Yeah.
But let's move on to another source, one who definitely doesn't shy away from drama. Billy Chris, an American prophet who claims to get messages straight from God. His predictions about 2025 are pretty intense.
He paints this very vivid picture of America in 2025. Imagine, like, Times Square completely deserted, a giant moon hanging over Miami,
Mhm.
and these, like, crazy lightning storms ravaging the country.
Okay, that's some serious apocalyptic imagery. What's the message behind all of this?
Chris claims that, like, God is criticizing America, for its pride and unworthiness, and that's what's leading to all these disasters.
And I'm guessing this, divine critique doesn't just end there.
Nope. The climax of his vision is Yellowstone erupting. It would be this massive volcanic event, with catastrophic consequences for the whole world.
Whoa, that's a dramatic way to end part one.
Ugh.
We've gone from underwater continents and solar flares to cyber attacks and volcanic eruptions. It's a lot to take in.
It is, and we've only scratched the surface. In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some of the common threads running through these predictions and, what they might tell us about our fears and hopes for the future. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but after all those predictions, my head is spinning. Time travelers, volcanic eruptions, a giant moon over Miami. Whoa, it's a lot to take in.
It is a pretty wild mix of ideas. But if we, step back for a second and look at the bigger picture, there are actually some interesting patterns that start to pop up.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of patterns are you seeing?
Well, one of the most striking things is how many of these predictions focus on water. We've got Okawa's submerged Pacific, Balik and scallions, flooded America. It's almost like this recurring nightmare about rising sea levels and, devastating tsunamis.
Yeah, that imagery is, it's hard to forget. And it's not just about the destruction either, right? There's this feeling of loss, like whole cities and coastlines just vanishing underwater. It's like tapping into this primal fear of the unknown, of nature's power to completely change our world.
Exactly. And you have to wonder if it's, reflecting this growing anxiety about climate change, this subconscious fear of what we're doing to the planet.
That makes sense. So we've got this theme of water, but what other patterns are you noticing?
Well, along with the environmental stuff, there's also this strong theme of social and political upheaval. Remember Parker's predictions about cyber attacks, tensions boiling over into conflict in Asia, even a potential assassination?
It's like these predictions are mirroring this, a deeper sense of unease about, how fragile our world really is. We're vulnerable to both natural disasters and human conflict. And maybe these predictions are tapping into that fear.
It's a fascinating idea, and it's important to remember that these predictions, even though they can be kind of scary, they're not all, doom and gloom. There are these hints of renewal and transformation woven into them.
You're talking about Parker's Phoenix in the Fire vision, right? That
Yeah.
even after major destruction, there's a chance for a new beginning.
Exactly. And even Chris's apocalyptic vision, as terrifying as it is, you could see it as this call for a spiritual awakening, a return to, humility and recognizing something bigger than ourselves.
It's like they're saying, hey, things might get tough, but even in the middle of all the chaos, there's potential for, growth and positive change.
Right. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. These predictions aren't necessarily about, predicting the future perfectly. They're more about reflecting on where we are now, challenging our values, and making us think about different paths forward.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the common themes, but what about the sources themselves? We've got prophetic dreams, time travel claims, psychic visions, maps of the future, even messages from God. It's quite a mix.
It is. And I think that's part of what makes this so interesting. We're looking at all these different ways of predicting the future, each with its own, perspective and approach. But even with all those differences, there are some surprising overlaps in the themes and imagery.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's something more going on here, something beyond, our usual understanding of time and perception. But as much as I love speculating about the mysteries of the universe, I think it's time to bring things back down to earth a little bit and talk about what these predictions could actually mean for us.
Let's put on our analytical hats for a minute.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
After all, knowledge is most useful when we can actually apply it to our lives.
Yeah.
So let's think about the implications of what we've learned. What if, even just some of these predictions come true? What would be the biggest consequences?
Well, on a global scale, it's pretty daunting if, Coastal cities are flooded. We're talking about like mass displacement of people, economic chaos, political instability, a level of disruption unlike anything we've ever seen.
And we haven't even talked about the potential impact of, increased solar activity.
Hmm.
Imagine like widespread communication breakdowns, damaged satellites, massive power outages. It's a recipe for chaos. Sounds like a disaster movie. But it's a possibility we have to, take seriously. And all of this global upheaval would obviously, trickle down and affect our everyday lives.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a world with like limited access to technology, disruptions to supply chains, potential food shortages.
Yeah.
It would require a huge shift in our lifestyles and priorities.
We might have to rediscover the value of self-sufficiency, relying on our local communities and resources, maybe even embrace a simpler way of life.
Exactly. And I think this potential for like disruption also gives us a chance to reevaluate our values and priorities. If we're faced with the possibility of loss and upheaval, what would really matter to us? Our relationships, our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
It's like these predictions, as unsettling as they can be, they also offer a chance for personal growth and transformation. They force us to ask some hard questions and face our fears. But they also invite us to, discover what's truly important.
That's a great way to put it. And it reminds us that even when we're facing uncertainty, we still have the power to choose how we respond, how we adapt, and how we ultimately, shape our own destinies.
Okay, so we've talked about the themes, the sources, the potential impact. But what does it all mean for us, like right here, right now? How can we, take these predictions and actually apply them to our lives today?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something we'll be exploring more in the final part of our deep dive. But I think one key takeaway is the importance of, preparedness.
Preparedness, like in what sense?
Well, whether these specific predictions actually come true or not, they highlight just how unpredictable life can be and how important it is to be ready for the unexpected. That means, having a plan, gathering resources, learning some basic skills.
So it's not just about stocking up on canned goods and bottled water.
Right. It's also about, cultivating resilience, adaptability, a willingness to learn and grow when things get tough. It's about developing that inner strength to handle whatever challenges come our way, whether it's a natural disaster, an economic downturn, or, even just personal setbacks.
That's a powerful message. But I'm also curious about how these predictions, challenge our ideas about the future. Do they offer any, alternative perspectives, any different paths forward?
That's where things get really interesting. You see, these predictions, even though they often focus on potential disasters, they also have these seeds of possibility within them. They invite us to reimagine what the future could be, to consider different ways of living, and to embrace the potential for positive change.
It's like those visions of a world after, a major reset,
Yeah.
where people have to rebuild everything from scratch.
Yeah.
It makes you think about what's truly important and how we could build a more sustainable and equitable society.
Precisely. It's about using these potential challenges as a catalyst for growth, for innovation, for a deeper connection to ourselves, our communities, and the planet.
So instead of seeing these predictions as inevitable doom, we can see them as opportunities to course correct, to change our priorities, and to create a future that's more aligned with, our values and aspirations.
That's a powerful way to look at it. And it highlights how important it is to recognize that we're not just passive observers in this whole thing. We have the power to shape the future through our choices, our actions, and even our beliefs.
So what does that look like in practical terms? What steps can we take, today to embrace these possibilities and build a more resilient and fulfilling future?
That's the big question, right? And it's something we'll be diving into in the last part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into 2025 predictions. It's been quite a journey exploring these submerged continents and, all this potential for global upheaval.
It really has. But as we wrap up, I think it's important to shift our focus from just predicting the future to actually shaping it.
Okay, I like where this is going. So how do we go from these, predictions and potential futures to actually doing something now?
Well, like we talked about in the last part, preparedness is key. It's about having a plan for different situations, whether it's a natural disaster, an economic downturn, or, even a personal crisis.
So stock up on canned goods and bottled water. Got it. But you were saying that preparedness is about more than just physical supplies.
Right, exactly. It's also about building that resilience, that adaptability, and a willingness to, learn and grow from those challenges. It's about fostering a mindset that that embraces change and uncertainty instead of, being afraid of it.
So how do we actually cultivate that kind of resilience? It sounds kind of abstract.
It's about building strong communities, fostering those, meaningful connections with people, and developing a sense of purpose that goes beyond just, material possessions. It's about taking care of our mental and emotional well-being so that we can, weather any storm.
That makes sense. So we've got preparedness, but how do these like 2025 predictions challenge our ideas about the future? Do they offer any different perspectives or like paths forward?
They absolutely do. Even though a lot of these predictions focus on, potential disasters, they also contain these seeds of possibility. They invite us to, reimagine what the future could be, to think
Yeah.
about different ways of living, and to embrace the potential for positive transformation.
Yeah, it's like those visions of a world after a major reset, right? Where people have to rebuild everything from scratch. It makes you think about what's really essential and how we might create a more sustainable and equitable society.
Exactly. It's about using these potential challenges as opportunities for growth, for innovation, and for a deeper connection to ourselves, our communities, and the planet.
So instead of seeing these predictions as, certain doom, we can see them as chances to course correct, to shift our priorities and to build a future that's more aligned with our values and aspirations.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. And it highlights how important it is to remember that we're not just, passive bystanders in all of this. We have the power to shape the future through our choices, our actions, and even our beliefs.
So what does that look like practically speaking? What steps can we take today to, embrace those possibilities and create a more resilient and fulfilling future?
Well, it starts with awareness. We need to, educate ourselves about the challenges we're facing, both locally and globally. And then it's about taking action, whether that's supporting sustainable practices, advocating for social justice, or just, making more conscious choices in our daily lives.
It's about like being the change we want to see in the world, even in small ways.
Exactly. And it's about tapping into our collective creativity and ingenuity to find solutions that actually address the root causes of these potential problems.
And it sounds like a lot depends on, having a solutions-oriented mindset, focusing on what we can do instead of getting caught up in, fear and despair.
Absolutely. It's about becoming active participants in shaping the future, not just, passive recipients of whatever happens.
Well, I think that's a really empowering message to end on. It reminds us that, even though the future may be uncertain, it also holds this incredible potential for positive change.
It does. And as we navigate, the complexities of the years ahead, let's remember what we've learned from these predictions, that call for preparedness, the invitation to reimagine how we relate to the world, and the power we have to shape our collective destiny.
So to all our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this final thought. What seeds of possibility will you choose to nurture as we, all journey together into this uncharted territory of 2025 and beyond?
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating mysteries of life. Until next time.